before we begin this extraordinary documentary, I want to ask you, the viewer, a question. Where in the world are you watching from today? Comment your country below, because this story will take us across oceans, across cultures, and deep into a palace whose walls have kept secrets for centuries. What you are about to hear is a remarkable tale of broken tradition, hidden threats, royal vulnerability, and a decision that shocked the world. A story of power meeting humility, of loyalty meeting danger, and a Filipino who walked into a foreign monarchy and changed it forever. This is a cinematic journey of Ramon Rey de la Vega, a man whose courage forced a fictional British royal family to rewrite a 500-year-old rule, a rule that was never meant to be touched, a rule that no outsider had ever broken, until a Filipino bodyguard proved he was the only one who could save them. Our story begins in the grand halls of Balmoral Crest Palace, the ancestral home of the fictional British royal family. Unlike the real historical monarchy, this family reigned over a symbolic European kingdom with deep traditions and rigid expectations. Their customs were legendary. Royal guards had to come from elite British regiments. Foreign personnel were forbidden from holding protective roles, and every bodyguard had to be trained in-house through a multi-generation lineage. But tradition was becoming increasingly impractical. Political tensions were rising, extremists were becoming more unpredictable, and the royal heir, Prince Leopold, beloved by the public, had become the target of increasingly credible threats. Security agencies detected a pattern too precise to ignore. There were whispers inside the palace that no matter how strong their traditions were, the royal guard was failing to adapt. A silent fear grew within the royal walls. Was tradition becoming a liability? Prince Leopold, 32 years old, charismatic, forward-thinking, and often described as the people's prince, was known for breaking stereotypes. While his relatives embraced formality, Leopold embraced modernity. He traveled alone, walked among crowds, and refused to wall himself off from the people he hoped to lead someday. But that openness carried risk. And one autumn evening, during a charity event in London, those risks materialized. A lone assailant slipped through the crowd with a hidden weapon. The royal guard reacted, but not fast enough. The attacker was subdued only because a civilian nearby who tackled him seconds before he reached the prince. The palace was shaken. The prime minister demanded immediate reinforcement. The media asked how a centuries-old guard force failed to protect the future king. And behind closed doors, Leopold himself confronted the palace council. We need new blood. Our traditions cannot protect us from modern threats. But the council disagreed. They insisted that tradition was what made the monarchy respected. Outsourcing security was unthinkable. Hiring a foreigner? Even worse. The Royal Guard commander, Sir Alistair Fenton, argued that no outsider could understand the palace's protocols. He believed the threat was simply a rare failure, not a sign of deeper issues. Leopold was unconvinced. He demanded external candidates be reviewed, quietly, discreetly, anonymously. The council refused. So Leopold bypassed them. In secret, he contacted the International Protection Agency, a private global organization that had trained elite operatives around the world. He asked for a short list of specialists with experience in diplomatic security, counter-surveillance, and cultural adaptability. The agency responded with 5 names. Among them was a Filipino, a man with an uncanny reputation for neutrality, discipline, and almost preternatural danger awareness. His name, Ramon Rey de la Vega. Rey was an enigma. Born in Cavite, raised by a military father and a schoolteacher mother, he grew up with discipline sharpened by compassion. After serving in a UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, he joined a private security consultancy that specialized in high-risk assignments. Rey was known for spotting threats before anyone else noticed them. Some joked he could smell danger. Others said he had a soldier's eyes, but a teacher's heart. Prince Leopold was immediately intrigued. The prince reviewed Ray's mission files and stopped when he read a field report describing how Ray evacuated 30 civilians during a bombing, refusing to leave until he was certain everyone was safe. "This is the kind of man I want beside me," Leopold said. But palace officials laughed when they saw Ray's name on the candidate list. "A Filipino? Impossible," one scoffed. "We have rules. Rules older than the monarchy itself." Leopold refused to accept their rejection. He arranged a secret meeting at a quiet estate outside London, away from the eyes of the press and palace staff. Ray arrived wearing simple clothes, no medals, no swagger, no arrogance. Leopold expected a hardened warrior, but instead he met a calm, observant man who spoke softly but confidently. Ray bowed respectfully and said, "Your Highness, your security is not about strength alone. It is about understanding intent." Leopold knew instantly that this was no ordinary bodyguard. Over the next 3 hours, Ray conducted a full risk assessment of the state on the fly. He pointed out blind spots, predictable travel routes, and vulnerabilities even the Royal Guard had missed. Leopold was speechless. By the end of the meeting, he knew he had found the right protector. Now came the hard part, convincing the palace to break centuries of tradition. When Leopold returned to Balmoral Crest and announced his decision, the palace erupted with outrage. Sir Alistair Fenton slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot allow a foreigner, especially one outside our lineage, to take a guard position." Another council member declared it would make the monarchy appear weak. Leopold countered, "What makes us weak is refusing to change." The Queen Mother, Eleanor Regina II, quietly observed the argument. She respected tradition far more than Leopold did, but she also knew the threats against her grandson were escalating. She asked one question, "Can you protect my grandson better than the guard?" Leopold answered without hesitation, "Yes." Silence followed. The Queen nodded slowly. "Then tradition must bend." But Sir Alistair refused to yield. He demanded a test, a trial Ray would have to pass, a trial designed to make him fail. Ray arrived at the palace at dawn, unaware that the Royal Guard had prepared a series of nearly impossible challenges. They wanted to embarrass him, make him quit, prove to Leopold that outsiders had no place within their sacred circle. The first test was surveillance recognition, identifying hostile actors planted within a crowded courtyard. Ray completed it flawlessly in under 8 minutes. The second test was obstacle navigation across the palace's underground tunnels. Ray finished it in half the usual time. The third test was psychological pressure, a simulated attack scenario with randomized patterns. Ray's movements were fluid, decisive, and controlled. By midday, several guards were whispering among themselves. Sir Alistair watched with clenched jaw. Ray wasn't simply passing. He was outperforming their best men. Only one test remained, the loyalty challenge. A test of judgment, not strength. For the final test, Ray was placed in a controlled environment, unaware that hidden cameras monitored his every move. He was instructed to stay put until further notice. Hours passed. At one point, a guard disguised as a palace servant walked by, pretending to struggle with a heavy crate. Ray immediately stepped forward and helped him, even though protocol dictated that candidates were not to leave their assigned area. Sir Alistair smirked. "Disqualified," he said, but Queen Eleanor intervened. She pressed replay on the footage. When Ray helped the servant, he subtly positioned himself between the crate and the nearest exit, ensuring the servant could not harm anyone nearby. It wasn't disobedience. It was protection. Smart protection. The Queen turned to Sir Alistair. He passed. "Better than any of your men." The decision was sealed. Ramon de la Vega will become the first foreign royal bodyguard in history. The world erupted with curiosity. News outlets questioned why a British royal family, fictional though it was, had broken tradition. Social media buzzed with speculation. Was the royal guard failing? Was the prince in danger? Why a Filipino bodyguard? Leopold ignored the noise. He officially welcomed Ray into the royal protection detail during a private ceremony in the palace chapel. Ray wore the dark navy uniform tailored specifically for him. He felt the weight of centuries of tradition pressing upon his shoulders, but he carried it with grace. For the first time, Leopold felt genuinely safe. Ray noticed everything: the movement of shadows, the patterns of guests, the rhythm of footsteps. Even the Queen admitted quietly, there is something reassuring about him. But not everyone was happy. Sir Alistair vowed silently that he would find a way to remove Ray. Ray moved into the palace quarters reserved for senior guards, though he kept his room modest. He decorated it with a single photograph, his parents standing outside their home in Cavite. Every morning, he jogged through the palace gardens at dawn, always alert, always scanning. The palace staff quickly warmed him. He thanked everyone by name, helped with tasks that weren't his responsibility, and made people feel seen. Some found it strange. A royal guard who wasn't cold or intimidating. But Ray believed respect protected a man just as much as armor. Prince Leopold enjoyed their conversations, often asking Ray about Filipino culture, traditions, and values. Ray, in turn, learned about royalty, how it was both privilege and prison. Slowly, a bond formed. But shadows were gathering beyond the palace walls. Someone was plotting something far more deadly. Weeks after Ray's appointment, British intelligence intercepted chatter about a planned kidnapping. The target, Prince Leopold. A radical group believed Leopold's modern views threatened their agenda. They wanted to destabilize the monarchy and cause a political crisis. Ray was briefed, but something in the report disturbed him. The timeline didn't make sense. The attackers knew too much about palace routes, schedules, and security gaps. Someone with inside knowledge was feeding them information. Ray quietly began investigating. He reviewed guard rosters, access logs, and communication histories. A pattern emerged, subtle but undeniable. Sir Alistair's second-in-command, Captain Rowan Hunt, had made unauthorized contact with an outside group weeks earlier. But Ray had no proof, only intuition. Leopold trusted Ray completely, but the council still did not. And accusing a high-ranking guard without evidence could destroy Ray's career. The attack came sooner than expected. One rainy evening, as Leopold prepared to leave the palace for a charitable gala, Ray sensed something wrong. The rhythm of the rain against the stone courtyard was uneven. He scanned the environment and noticed a shadow where none should be. "We're not leaving," Ray whispered firmly. Leopold hesitated, but obeyed. Seconds later, a smoke grenade exploded near the gate. Sir Alistair's men panicked, scrambling to contain the chaos. Ray grabbed Leopold and moved him through a concealed route he discovered earlier, one that even Sir Alistair had overlooked. Fire alarms blared. Guards shouted. Lightning illuminated masked attackers climbing over the palace walls. Ray pushed Leopold into a secured chamber and barricaded the door. "Stay here," Ray said calmly. "I'll be back." Without waiting for a reply, he ran straight into the storm. The courtyard became a battlefield. Rain mixed with smoke as silhouettes clashed in the dark. Ray moved with instinctive precision, disarming one attacker, disabling another, using the terrain to his advantage. The royal guards were disorganized, unprepared for such a coordinated ambush. Sir Alistair barked orders, but his men were overwhelmed. Suddenly, Ray saw Captain Rowan Hunt signaling attackers from behind a wall. Betrayal confirmed. Ray charged toward him, dodging swings and gunfire. The moment Hunt saw Ray approaching, his face twisted in fear. "You don't belong here," he shouted. Ray tackled him to the ground. They struggled violently, but Ray's discipline and training prevailed. He pinned Hunt against the wall and restrained him. Hunt screamed, "You ruined everything." Ray replied quietly, "No, you did." The attackers, now leaderless, began to retreat. By the time dawn broke, the palace grounds were secured. Dozens of suspects were arrested, and Captain Hunt was taken into custody. Ray guided Prince Leopold safely out of secure chamber. The prince embraced him, relief and gratitude in his eyes. "You saved my life," he whispered. Sir Alistair, humiliated and shaken, approached Ray slowly. For the first time, the commander lowered his head. "I misjudged you," he admitted. Queen Eleanor convened an emergency council meeting that same morning. She addressed the room with composed authority. Without Ramon de la Vega, the monarchy would be mourning a prince today. The council finally acknowledged what Leopold had known all along. Tradition had nearly cost him everything. Ray was officially promoted to chief personal protector, the highest bodyguard position in the kingdom. Ray's promotion became global news. Headlines around the world celebrated the Filipino protector who saved a prince. Filipino communities in the UK cheered, waving flags outside the palace gates. Social media called Ray the Lion of Cavite, but Ray remained humble. He refused interviews. He sent extra money home to his parents, asking them to stay quiet about his achievements. Meanwhile, Prince Leopold insisted Ray accompany him everywhere, from diplomatic events to charity missions. Leopold trusted Ray more than anyone else. The prince also began advocating for reforms within the royal guard, pushing for diversity, merit-based recruitment, and modern security strategies. Sir Alistair, once Ray's biggest critic, now listened to him with respect. But not all threats vanish overnight. Ray understood that as long as Leopold stood for progress, enemies would always be watching. Months later, the royal family prepared for an international summit in Vienna. Leaders from across Europe would attend, and intelligence reports warned of potential unrest. Ray conducted recon missions days in advance, studying escape routes, reaction times, and emergency drills. But one detail troubled him. The summit venue relied heavily on an external private security firm whose protocols seemed outdated. Ray requested permission to overhaul the venue security layout. The event organizers refused, claiming it was too late. Ray insisted, "If your highness goes into that venue without changes, you're walking into a trap." Leopold believed him. Behind closed doors, Leopold, now empowered after the palace attack, pressured the summit committee to implement Ray's recommendations. They reluctantly agreed. It was a decision that would soon prove life-saving. On the day of the summit, Vienna was buzzing with diplomats, journalists, and protest groups. Ray stood beside Leopold as they entered the grand hall, adorned with chandeliers and marble pillars. At first, everything seemed normal. Delegates shook hands. Cameras flashed. Speeches began. But Ray's instincts triggered. A man in the crowd avoided eye contact, gripping something under his coat. Ray tracked him, analyzing every movement. When the man suddenly pushed through the crowd, Ray sprinted forward, tackling him before he could reach the prince. A concealed weapon clattered on the floor. Screams erupted. Security forces swarmed the area. The man was arrested. Reporters captured the moment on live television. By evening, the world was calling Ray the guardian who never sleeps. Leopold stood before international cameras after the incident, expressing gratitude to Ray and emphasizing the importance of global cooperation in security. His speech went viral. Young leaders admired his courage, but Ray avoided the spotlight, preferring to monitor the perimeter rather than answer questions. Later that night, in their private quarters, Leopold told Ray, "You've changed my life and the monarchy." Ray shook his head gently. I'm just doing my duty, Your Highness. But Leopold smiled knowingly. Duty is easy. Loyalty is rare. Their bond strengthened not as prince and protector, but as two men who trusted each other implicitly. Ray realized that despite being far from home, he had found purpose and a family of sorts within the palace walls. The Queen Mother, once skeptical, now adored Ray. She often invited him for afternoon tea, shocking the palace staff. She asked about his family, his upbringing, and Filipino traditions. Ray spoke about Bayanihan, the spirit of communal unity, and how it shaped his worldview. The Queen listened intently, touched by the values Ray carried. "No wonder my grandson trusts you," she said warmly. Meanwhile, public opinion soared. Citizens loved the idea of a Filipino bodyguard protecting their prince. It symbolized progress, inclusion, and modernization. Merchants even began selling novelty figurines of Ray in miniature palace uniforms. Ray laughed when he saw them, mortified but amused. Still, not everyone liked these changes. A shadowy group, angered that their previous attack had failed, began planning something bigger. This time, the threat was far more sophisticated, a coordinated plot across multiple cities. Intelligence agencies warned that the group intended to assassinate Leopold during his annual humanitarian tour, a tradition where he met with marginalized communities. Ray insisted the tour be postponed. Leopold refused. "If I cancel, fear wins," he said. Ray admired his courage, but feared his stubbornness. He redesigned the entire tour route, rotating vehicles, altering schedules, and embedding undercover operatives within the crowd. Yet, deep down, Ray sensed something was off. The threat profile wasn't consistent with a simple extremist attack. Someone with resources and intelligence was pulling the strings. Someone powerful. And that someone was watching Ray as much as they were watching Leopold. The tour's first stop was a remote town known for its historic cathedrals. Ray scanned every rooftop, alley, and window. When Leopold stepped onto the church platform to greet the crowd, Ray saw a subtle reflection from a bell tower. A sniper. Without hesitation, Ray shoved Leopold to the ground. A shot echoed. Panic exploded. Guards scrambled. Ray sprinted toward the tower, weaving through terrified civilians. He reached the staircase and ascended with deadly precision. Inside, he tackled the sniper, but was stunned to recognize him. It was a former intelligence operative from a rival European nation, a mercenary. Someone had paid for a professional hit. Ray restrained him and alerted authorities. But the realization chilled him. The attack was not ideological. It was geopolitical. The fallout was enormous. Political tension spiked across Europe. Diplomats denied involvement, but evidence pointed toward a conspiracy meant to destabilize the fictional monarchy. Leopold was shaken. "Why us?" he asked. Ray answered truthfully, "Because your vision threatens those who depend on division." The Queen convened an emergency meeting with defense officials. Ray was present, offering insights that surprised the generals. His ability to predict threats, understand human behavior, and propose practical countermeasures impressed even his critics. The palace began restructuring its entire security doctrine around Ray's strategies. Foreign governments requested consultations. Ray refused them all. His only duty was to protect Leopold. But Ray also knew the conspiracy was far from over, and the enemy he feared most was still hidden in shadows. As months passed, Ray became both respected and feared within the palace. Guards admired him. Staff trusted him. The public adored him. But the council? They were divided. Some believed Ray was essential. Others feared he had gained too much influence. Rumors spread that Ray was controlling the prince, a lie circulated by foreign agents to create internal tension. Ray ignored the gossip. But Leopold confronted the council with firmness. "Ramon has saved my life 3 times. If you question him, you question me." It was a bold statement, one that solidified their alliance. Still, Ray wondered how long unity could last in a world built on hierarchy. He didn't seek power. He sought stability. But stability in the monarchy was becoming increasingly fragile. One winter night, while patrolling the palace grounds, Ray sensed something familiar, the unsettling quiet before danger. He checked the perimeter. The guards were alert. The cameras were clean. Nothing seemed wrong. Yet Ray's instinct screamed otherwise. He hurried toward the queen's wing. Her room was silent. Too silent. Ray burst inside, just in time to stop an intruder who had slipped past every guard. They fought fiercely. Furniture shattered. Glass broke. The intruder was skilled, trained, and strong. But Ray overpowered him. The queen awoke to the sound of struggle. "Ray, is that you?" she whispered. Ray knelt. "You're safe now, your majesty." She touched his hand. "You are the greatest blessing ever brought to this palace." The palace attack sparked national outrage. Citizens protested, demanding tighter protection for the royals. Politicians debated whether the monarchy should increase collaboration with international security experts. Meanwhile, Ray interrogated the intruder, discovering a horrifying truth. He was not working alone. The plot involved elites from multiple countries, each wanting to exploit the fictional kingdom's economy and influence. Prince Leopold convened a task force, appointing Ray as chief advisor. For the first time, Ray led strategy sessions involving generals, intelligence chiefs, and diplomats. He spoke with precision, clarity, and humility. Leaders listened. One official whispered to another, "He speaks like a commander." But Ray didn't care about titles. He cared about stopping the threat permanently. The final confrontation unfolded at an international economic forum attended by the royal family. Ray accompanied Leopold closely. Every instinct was on high alert. Midway through the event, Ray noticed synchronized distractions, a fire alarm, a staged argument, a blackout in one section of the hall, all designed to divert attention. Then he saw it, a figure approaching Leopold with concealed device. Ray lunged forward, shielding the prince just as the device detonated. A blinding flash. Smoke everywhere. Ray absorbed the impact. Guards rushed in. Ray was injured, his arm bleeding but alive. He pushed himself up and dragged Leopold to a secure area. "You're hurt," Leopold shouted. Ray shook his head. "I'm still standing. That's enough." Ray spent a week recovering in the royal medical wing. The queen visited daily. Guards brought him gifts. Citizens held vigils outside the palace gates, lighting candles for the Filipino protector who saved their prince once again. News networks aired documentaries about Ray's life. Filipinos worldwide celebrated him as a symbol of courage and dignity. When Ray finally stood again, the palace staff applauded. Leopold entered the room and embraced him. "I owe you my life," he said. Ray replied softly, "You owe me nothing. I chose this duty." The prince shook his head. "Then let me choose something in return." During a televised national ceremony, Prince Leopold announced sweeping reforms to the royal guard, including, for the first time in history, the acceptance of international protectors based on merit rather than nationality. He named the new program the De La Vega Protocol, honoring Ray's extraordinary service. Millions watched. Ray stood humbly behind the prince, overwhelmed. The queen then presented Ray with the kingdom's highest civilian honor. "For bravery beyond measure," she declared. Ray bowed, tears in his eyes. He had left the Philippines in search of work. Now he stood as a hero in a foreign land, a man who reshaped a monarchy. And so, the British royal family rewrote centuries of tradition because one Filipino bodyguard proved that courage knows no nationality. Ramon Ray de la Vega's journey, from a modest childhood in Cavite to protecting a prince, became a global symbol of loyalty, humility, and excellence. His legacy transformed not just a palace, but a nation's understanding of security, diversity, and unity. Ray never sought fame. He sought purpose. And in protecting Prince Leopold, he found it. This is a story of how a Filipino broke barriers, defied expectations, and changed the course of a royal lineage forever. It is a reminder to all of us that greatness can come from anywhere, and sometimes from the very last place tradition expects.